Good morning. Can you hear me? And welcome to First Parish Church of Stowe and Acton, a welcoming and spiritual community. My name is Karen Kinnear, and I facilitate the small group ministry program for FPC. For those visiting FPC for the first time, extra welcome. Please let us know you are here by filling out one of our visitor information cards in the pew, and hand it to an usher, drop it in the plate, or hand it to Meg, our welcoming staff member. Our minister, staff, and board are listed on the front of the order of service. Please feel free to ask me or any of these people for more information. If you would like a large print order of service or hymnal or an assisted listening device, please ask our ushers. Our assisted listening devices are small radios, which anyone is welcome to use one of these to listen to the service from another space in or around the building. After the service, please join us for coffee and conversation in our fellowship hall, which is one level down at the other end of our building, or in a breakout room if you're joining us online. I'd like to draw your attention to the announcements in your order of service and also to invite you to check out our webpage for more information. You can also sign up there for our newsletter and email alerts. Today from 5 to 8 p.m., there's a potluck dinner in Fellowship Hall, including 3 families seeking asylum from Latin America. See your order of service on how to contact Roy Miller to RSVP. This Friday, January 26th from 6 to 8 p.m., dinner church at FPC is hosted by the UC Marlborough Hudson. See your order of service how to RSVP so they know how much food to make for us. So Sunday, the 4th of February at 4 p.m. in the sanctuary, there's another concert from Still Here, a benefit concert for the Interfaith Partnership for Refugee Resettlement. See the order of service for how to get tickets, and see your emails and FPC forum from Mary Evans on food needed for our newly arriving families and upcoming moving day help. So small group ministry, SGM registrations for 2024 are due today. So if you'd like to be part of the new groups, which will start meeting in February, you can actually join at any time of the year, but it's extra fun if you join at the beginning of the year. What I like best about SGM is that for only 24 hours a year, 2 hours a month, I now feel a whole lot closer to a lot of special people. And when we have our in-gathering in September, it makes me smile to reconnect with them. So we're forming groups. There are 8 to 10 people. We have facilitated discussions on topics chosen to increase our awareness of ourselves and our connections with each other. We could also use another co-facilitator, so let me know if you're interested. Please check out our online link in your order of service or follow the link on our website in news and events in the lower right-hand corner. And now let us come together for a time of community, singing, and worship.
Good morning. I'm going to be leading worship from over here this morning because I have a little bit of a flare-up of an old back injury happening today. But the great thing is with our new technology, even if you can't see me that well from where you're sitting, you can see me on the screens. Our opening words today are attributed to Kalidasa. Look to this day, for it is life the very life of life. In its brief course lie all the verities and realities of your existence, the bliss of growth, the glory of action, the splendor of beauty. For yesterday is but a dream, and tomorrow is only a vision. But today, well lived, makes every day, every yesterday, a dream of happiness, and every tomorrow a vision of hope. Look well, therefore, to this day. And as Chris lights our chalice, I'll share these words by Leslie Takahashi. All that we have ever loved and all that we have ever been stands with us on the brink of all that we aspire to create. A deeper peace, a larger love, a more embracing hope, a deeper joy in this life we share. Now I invite you to stand in body or in spirit and join in singing Morning Has Come, hymn number 1000, which is in the teal hymnals. Please remain standing or sit, whatever you're comfortable for our land acknowledgement and then covenant and affirmation.
It's coming. We would like to acknowledge that this service is being held by a community that gathers on the stolen traditional lands of the Massachusetts, Nipmuc, Pawtucket, and Wampanoag people. We pay respect to those indigenous peoples who lost their lives in the colonization of this land and recognize that these indigenous tribes are still today facing violations of sovereignty, territory, and water. We also give thanks for the earth we walk upon, the waters, the life-giving plants, and all the earth's creatures, as well as the winds, sun, moon, and stars. We recognize this is just a first step in moving toward right relationship with Native peoples and the healing of the earth.
This is law. This is our great covenant, to dwell together in peace, to seek the truth in love, and to help one another.
Hello. Oh, yes, I'm on. Hello. I'd like, oops. Is that better?
Yes.
Okay, I'd like to invite anyone who's young or young at heart to join me up front, please. Now it's on? Yes. Okay. I'll figure it out. So I will be reading to them a story called The Three Questions. So just like Reverend Cindy, I'm going to have to sit in order to, work with my leg in the book. But the pages will be up front for all of you to see. Good morning, Dante. Do you want a pillow? One question? No? Okay. This is a story called The Three Questions. There once was a boy named Nikolai who sometimes felt uncertain about the right way to act. I want to be a good person, he told his friends, but I don't always know the best way to do that. If only I could find the answers to my three questions, Nikolai continued, then I would always know what to do. Do you all always know what to do? Oh, you know what to do all the time? Oh, well, maybe you can teach me, Sage. She has the answers already, and we haven't even gotten to the end of the story. When is the best time to do things? Question number one. Who is the most important one? Question number two. And what is the right thing to do? Question number three. Nikolai's friends considered his first question. Then Sonia the heron spoke. To know the best time to do things, one must plan in advance, she said. Gogol the monkey, who had been rooting through some leaves to find something good to eat, said, you will know when to do things if you watch and pay close attention. Then Pushkin the dog, who was just dozing off, rolled over and said, you can't pay attention to everything yourself. You need a pack to keep watch and help you decide when to do things. For example, Gogol, a coconut is about to fall on your head. Do you think that was good advice? No, they weren't good answers? Okay. Nikolai thought for a moment, then he asked his second question, who is the most important one? Those who are closest to heaven, said Sonia, circling up into the sky. Can any of you fly? Wow, I love that you all are really thinking about it. That's amazing. You can sleep. Those who know how to heal the sick, said Gogol, stroking his bruised noggin. Those who make the rules, growled Pushkin. Nikolai thought some more. Then he asked the third question. What is the right thing to do? Flying, said Sonia. Now Sage says it's sleeping. Having fun all the time, laughed Gogol. Fighting, barked Pushkin right away. Then the boy thought for a long while. He loved his friends. He knew they were all trying their best to help him answer his questions, but their answers didn't seem quite right. Then an idea came to him. I know, he thought. I will ask Leo the turtle. He has lived a very long time. Surely he will know the answers I am looking for. Technically what?
Technically, there's no right question because they all have to.
She said.
All pretty good.
She said, technically, there really is no such thing as one right question, but these are all pretty good. Nikolai hiked up into the mountains where the old turtle lived alone. When Nikolai arrived, he found Leo digging a garden. The turtle was old, and digging was hard for him. I have 3 questions. I came to ask your help, Nikolai said. When is the best time to do things? Who is the most important one? And what is the right thing to do? Leo listened carefully, but he only smiled. Then he went on with his digging. You must be tired, Nikolai said at last. Let me help you with that. The turtle gave him the shovel and thanked him. And because it was easier for a young boy to dig than it was for an old turtle, Nikolai kept on digging until the rows were finished. But just as he finished, the wind blew wildly and rain burst from darkened clouds. As they moved towards the cottage for shelter, Nikolai suddenly heard a cry for help. Running down the path, he found a panda whose leg had been injured by a falling tree. Looks kind of like me when I'm trying to walk. Carefully, Nikolai carried her into Leo's house and made a splint for her leg with a stick of bamboo. The storm raged on, banging at the doors and windows. The panda woke up. "Where am I?" she said. "And where is my child?" Whew, that's a scary feeling. The boy ran out of the cottage and down the path. The roar of the storm was deafening. Pushing against the howling wind and drenching rain, he ran faster into the forest. There, he found the panda's child, cold and shivering on the ground. The little panda was wet and scared, but alive. Nikolai carried her inside and made her warm and dry. Then he laid her in her mother's arms. Leo smiled when he saw what the boy had done. The next morning, the sun was warm, birds sang, and all was well with the world. The panda's leg was healing nicely, and she thanked Nikolai for saving her and her baby from the storm. At that moment, Sonia, Gogol, and Pushkin arrived to make sure everyone was all right. Nikolai felt great peace within himself. He had wonderful friends, and he had saved the panda and her child, but he also felt disappointed. He still had not found the answers to his 3 questions, so he asked Leo one more time. The old turtle looked at the boy. "But your questions have been answered," he said. "They have?" asked the boy. "Yesterday, if you had not stayed to help me dig my garden, you wouldn't have heard the panda's cries for help in the storm. Therefore, the most important time was the time you spent digging the garden. The most important one at that moment was me, and the most important thing to do was to help me with my garden. Later, when you found the injured panda, the most important time was the time you spent mending her leg and saving her child. The most important ones were the panda and her baby, and the most important thing to do was to take care of them and make them safe. Remember then that there is only one important time, and that time is now. The most important one is always the one you are with. So right now, you all are the most important ones for me. And the most important thing is to do good for the one who is standing at your side. For these, my dear boy, are the answers to what is most important in this world. And this is why we are here." You don't agree with how they hung the kite at the end? Okay, maybe you can draw a different picture and show me.
This is the time in our service now when we share our joys and sorrows, those things that we want to be known in beloved community. We're going to invite first our lay minister to share those we've received by email, and then we'll hear from those here in the room. If you would raise your hand and share your name as well as your joy or sorrow, and then we'll take joys and sorrows from those offline. Also, please share your name and your joy and sorrow. In that case, we light one last candle, if we still have one, for those that are left unspoken. And as we hold these joys and sorrows in our hearts and minds, let us listen to these words by Thich Nhat Hanh. "Let us be at peace with our bodies and our minds. Let us return to ourselves and become holy ourselves. Let us be aware of the source of being common to us all and to all living things. Evoking the presence of the great compassion, let us fill our hearts with our own compassion towards ourselves and towards all living beings. Let us pray that we ourselves cease to be the cause of suffering to each other. With humility and with awareness of the existence of life and of the sufferings that are going on around us, let us practice the establishment of peace in our hearts and on earth. Blessed be. Amen." The The work of this church is supported by the generosity of our members and friends who choose to donate freely to this congregation. And half of our plate every month is shared with one of the many agencies that we have chosen to support through vote of this congregation, this month with RIA, Ready, Inspire, Act, more about which you can find in your order of service. RIA is an organization that works with human trafficking survivors and does great work here in Massachusetts. So for both of these two wonderful agencies, we invite you to give gifts as freely as you are able.
Gotta put one foot in front of the other and lead with love. Put one foot in front of the other and lead with love. You gotta put one foot in front of the other and lead with love. Put one foot in front of the other and lead with love. Don't give up hope. Don't give up hope. You're not alone. You're not alone. Don't you give up. Don't you give up. Keep moving on. Keep moving on. You gotta put one foot in front of the other and lead with love. Put one foot in front of the other and lead with love. You gotta put one foot in front of the other and lead with love. Put one foot in front of the other and lead with love. Lift up your eyes. Lift up your eyes. Don't you despair. Don't you despair. Look up ahead. Look up ahead. The path is there. The path is there. I know you're scared. I know you're scared. And I'm scared too. And I'm scared too. But here I am. But here I am. Right next to you. Right next to you. You gotta put one foot in front of the other and lead with love. Put one foot in front of the other and lead with love. You gotta put one foot in front of the other and lead with love. Put one foot in front of the other and lead with love. Don't give up hope. Don't give up hope. You're not alone. You're not alone. Don't you give up. Don't you give up. Keep moving on. Keep moving on. You gotta put one foot in front of the other and lead with love. Put one foot in front of the other and lead with love. You gotta put one foot in front of the other and lead with love. Put one foot in front of the other and lead with love. And lead with love. And lead with love.
The story we heard for our Message for All Ages, The Three Questions by John Muth, is based on an older story of the Three Questions by the Russian author Leo Tolstoy. In Tolstoy's version, rather than it being a boy talking to animals, it's a king who asks his counselors and his entire kingdom the questions. And he doesn't get the answers from them, so he goes to the woods. And there he finds in classic fairy tale style, a hermit who shows him through example. The answers are still, of course, that now is the perfect time. And the most important one is the ones you're with. And the right thing to do is good for the person that you're with. In The Three Questions by Tolstoy, it has a very European fairy tale feel. Like many fairy tales, it features a king, one who is given wrong answers by several of his closest consultants, and then who takes to the woods and has a mystical encounter with a hermit there. We see this image of the king asking riddles, for example, in King Lear, who asks his 3 daughters the question of how much they love him, only to tragically reject the answer that's most true. Love like salt is the fairy tale motif from older fairy tales that King Lear is based on. And the Grimm fairy tale, The Three Feathers, has a king telling his 3 sons that whoever brings him the finest carpet will get to rule the kingdom. The first 2 sons do some pretty ordinary things and come back with ordinary carpets. And the 3rd son goes and sits down and talks to a magical toad who helps him out, and then turns into a beautiful princess as well. And Tolstoy is playing with these kinds of fairy tale motifs in the Three Questions story. However, while the story is very folkloric in its format, it's become very spiritual or religious, depending on your definitions of those words, in its content. And to me, it speaks to answer some questions that I've had when studying Christianity and Buddhism as well, in particularly. But I think that the story rings with motifs that resonate with Buddhism and Taoism and Christianity in particular, but to some degree with all world religions. So I want to begin with Buddhism. The Buddhist teacher Thich Nhat Hanh talks about mindfulness and living in the now a lot. And in the Miracle of Mindfulness, he writes about eating a tangerine in one of my favorite passages. He says, I remember a number of years ago when Jim and I were first traveling together in the United States, we sat under a tree and shared a tangerine. He began to talk about what we would be doing in the future. Whenever we thought about a project that seemed attractive or inspiring, Jim became so immersed in it that he literally forgot what he was doing in the present. He popped a section of tangerine in his mouth and, before he had begun chewing on it, had another slice ready to pop in his mouth again. He was hardly aware he was eating a tangerine. All I had to say was, you ought to eat the tangerine section you've already taken. And Jim was startled into realizing what he was doing. It was as if he hadn't been eating the tangerine at all. If he had been eating anything, he was eating his future plans. Another Buddhist story, this one called a classical tale about the Buddha called the Parable of the Poisoned Arrow, says this. In the parable, the monk is troubled by the Buddha's silence about issues of the cosmos and life and death. And he meets the Buddha and questions him on these things. And the Buddha says, it's just as if a man were wounded with an arrow thickly smeared with poison. His friends and companions, kinsmen and relatives would provide him with a surgeon. And the man would say, I won't have this arrow removed until I know whether the man who wounded me was a noble warrior or priest or a merchant or a worker. He would say, I won't have this arrow removed until I know the given name and clan of the man who wounded me, until I know whether he was tall or medium or short, until I know whether he was dark, ruddy-colored, or golden colored, until I know his hometown, village, and city, until I know whether the bow with which I was wounded was a longbow or a crossbow, and it goes on. He would say, I won't have this arrow removed until I know whether the shaft with which I was wounded was that of a common arrow, a curved arrow, a barbed, and so on. What's the point the Buddha is making? Life is too short to worry about these questions that you'll never have an answer to. In other words, the most important time is now. Thich Nhat Hanh explains in his book Zen Keys, suppose the man does not want the arrow removed. If he were to wait until all these questions had been answered, the man might die first. Life is so short, he continues, it must not be spent in endless metaphysical speculation that it does not bring us any closer to the truth. Interestingly, Tolstoy wrote about that poison arrow story himself a few years after he wrote The Three Questions. The struggle I always have with Buddhism is that struggle of living in the now. And the question of how does that, when we're living in the now, lead us to the work of justice and action? If you're always in the now and you're not thinking about the future, what does it matter when things go wrong? If all life is suffering, what does it matter that we should try to fix it? Similarly, I've had struggles with Christianity, which always, to me, seems very future-oriented towards heaven and hell, and it almost makes you wonder, what does life on this earth really matter? Because ultimately, we might as well die and go to where we're destined for. Tolstoy's story, I think, gives us an answer to both of those questions. How do we think about the future and plan for the future if we're living in the now? And how do we deal with the now if we're always thinking about the future? So with justice, I think you have to be worried about the present now, but you also have to be worried about the future, both at the same time. For me, and without that juxtaposition, it doesn't really work. So you could look at environmentalism and say, we might as well destroy the earth now because it's what's good for us now, because we're not thinking about the future. Or we could say, with the poison arrow situation, you know, I have all these questions about the future, and you're not dealing with the now. The 3 questions gives us a format in which the question about what is the perfect time, which is now, is mirrored with and paired with 2 other questions. Who is the most important one, and what is the most important thing to be doing? And that's what gives us the answer in both a Buddhist and a Christian context, and in a Taoist context and others, to say that it's more than just about the now. It's also about compassion. It's also about justice, because that's what it comes down to with the most important thing to be doing, which is good for the ones you're with. Now, the problem with that part of the story too, though, is with the question of who is the most important one. And the answer isn't, the most important one is the king. The most important one is your leader, your president. The most important one is your spiritual guru, me, right? No, the most important one is the one you're with. And the one you're with could be your loved one, could be your soulmate, could be a friend, could be an enemy. The person you're with could be the person you struggle with most in this moment. And they are the most important one. This comes down to the golden rule that's married with these 3 questions in Tolstoy's story and in Christianity and in Buddhism and Taoism. Across world religions, we get the golden rule. So beyond having compassion and beyond living in the now or living for the future, you have the question of doing good for the other. And the other is sometimes your enemy. How do we do that? It's the biggest struggle of universalism as a faith too. The fact that universalism means the ultimate goal of heaven is given to everybody universally, even the most evil person on earth. Or our first principle in Unitarian Universalism as it stands right now in our Article 2 of the UUA bylaws says that we believe in the inherent worth and dignity of every person. And I know that of all the principles, it's the one that I think most people struggle with most. What does that mean? The inherent worth and dignity of every person, even Hitler, even Donald Trump if you're a Democrat, or Biden if you're a Republican. Inherent worth and dignity of every person, and doing good for the one you're with. What if you're standing next to the president or the former president or someone you entirely disagree with? What if it's Hitler? What we remember about the golden rule is really the platinum rule, that it's not always about doing the thing that doing good for that person isn't always what that person would want, right? Doing good in a situation can mean that you're doing the good thing for the entire universe that is needed with this person beside you. So it can be sometimes that doing good is telling the hard truth. Doing the good is standing up for justice. And holding their inherent worth and dignity means holding that they are a person of worth, even while you struggle with how to make them change and how they need to be set on a different course in life. Doing good is ultimately putting them on that course towards the better world. Sometimes that means arguing, sometimes that means guiding, sometimes that means showing a different path in a number of different ways. One of the authors that I found really helpful on this question is Karen Armstrong, from her book on compassion and from her Ware lecture at the UUA General Assembly a dozen or more years ago. Karen Armstrong traces compassion through all the world religions, which is where she says the concept originated. She says the first example of teaching of compassion comes from Confucius. And then here's what she says about the idea of compassion in Judaism. She says, "My favorite golden rule story belongs to Hillel, the great Pharisee, who was an older contemporary of Jesus. And it's said that a pagan came to Hillel one day and promised to convert to Judaism on the condition that Hillel could recite the whole of Jewish teaching while he stood on one leg. And so Hillel stood on one leg and said, 'That which is hateful to you, do not do to your fellow man. That is the Torah, and everything else is only commentary. Go and study it.'" Karen Armstrong developed 12 steps to living a compassionate life, and she quotes Thich Nhat Hanh in them, and she talks about empathy, and she talks about mindfulness. And her last step, number 12, is this: after you've mastered all the other steps of compassion, love your enemies. And last week when I spent reading Martin Luther King's sermons, I also read his sermon called Love Your Enemies. Karen Armstrong says in her Ware lecture that she talks about loving your enemies by telling the story of the Greeks who invented tragedy in a dramatic form. And all of Athens had come to see the plays, she says, and even prisoners were released for them. And then she says this: "What the Greeks were doing was putting suffering on stage. So when the audience came together and watched a man or woman in the extremity of agony, faced with an impossible decision, faced with the awful results of the actions they hadn't intended, faced with the utter sorrow of human life, and when they saw this, each person felt that they were not alone. We all suffer. Even those who are most unfortunate will die an uncomfortable death. We will all get sick. We will all have pain, disappointment, sorrow. Sorrow is something that unites human beings," she continues. And in the course of the play, the leader of the chorus would turn to the audience and say, "Now, weep. Weep for Oedipus, a man who in real life you would probably shun, a man who inadvertently had killed his father, married his mother, 2 basic taboos. Or Hercules, who was driven mad by a goddess, and in his divinely inspired frenzy slaughtered his wife and children. Now weep for these people." And the Greeks did weep, she concludes. The Greeks did weep. This is where the path of compassion and the golden rule will lead you. This is where the 3 questions will lead you. The true ability to weep for your enemies, to love them, to hold them in inherent worth and dignity, to know that when you are with them, they are the most important ones. And the right thing to do is good for the one you are with, and the right time to be doing it is now. Because that's the thing about those 3 questions. When it says the most important person is the one you're with, and the most important thing to serve them is in their time of need, most important thing is to serve them in their time of need, it doesn't say that the person you're with is your best friend, or even the going is going to feel good. It's the hardest charge of universalism, the hardest charge of our Unitarian Universalist faith as well, to model God's love, if you believe in God, or in the inherent worth and dignity of every person. But ultimately, it's what we're called to do. What is the right time to do it? Right now. So, let us go, seizing in this very moment our one wild and precious day, and taking our compassion out into the world. May it be so. I know I say every hymn is my favorite, but of like the non-Christmas hymns, this next hymn really is like one of my top favorites. Number 108 in your gray hymnals, 108, "My Life Flows On." Please stand in body or in spirit. Our closing words are by Lao Zi from the Dao De Jing. Simplicity, patience, compassion. These are your three greatest treasures. Simple in actions and thoughts, you return to the source of being. Patient with both friends and enemies, you accord with the way things are. Compassionate towards yourself, you reconcile all beings in the world. May we go in peace and in justice and in the now. Blessed be.